Okay, so I think that I was explaining to you about the positive and negative deflections, and I think it was starting to sound stupid. So what I will just do to sum that up is to just say that the positive deflection is supposed to be when the electrical conduction is going towards where your lead placement would be, how it kind of slices through the heart. If it's going towards that, it's supposed to be positive. If it's going away from it, it's supposed to be negative. And that's important so that you can determine where in the heart the rhythm is coming from or starting. So let's start with our sinus tachycardias. I'm not going to go into that anymore. So you'll have your sinus rhythm, which is normal sinus. You'll always have a P, then you'll have a QRS, and then you'll have your T. If you see your P and a QRS and T, and then you count, I like to count from either R to R's, which is the bottom part, or your, what is it? Is that your S? Or it's the Q, I think. Their Q, no, that's the R to R. Count from your R to R from the top point or from the bottom point. It's easiest to put your calipers on. So if you're ghetto, like I am today, and you didn't bring your calipers, it's still pretty easy because you can just start where QRS meets up with the heavy line and then count from there, and it'll make it simple if you don't have your calipers and you don't have to cry like some people do. Oh my God, today I forgot my calipers. You should have thought of that. Duh. Anyways, so like I said, if you have your P, your QRS, and then your T, that's your complex. You know that it's a sinus. If you count it out, if you walk it out, my favorite song, and it's in between 60 and 100, you know that it's a normal sinus rhythm. You could put an SR. Some people like to put no ectopy, which is like an extra, irregular, or weird beat. If we're gonna be all like perfect and scientific, which I guess when it's dealing with people's lives, they would want that. So you could put a normal sinus rhythm with no ectopy. Um, Now, if you're looking and then you see that everything's walking out, everything's literally walking out, boom, 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 almost the same space in between each complex. And you notice that one comes a little bit early, just a little bit. Now, that one that comes a little bit early, check. See, it doesn't have a P, which is a little wave in front of the QRS, the big thing. If it has a P and then it follows a QRS, then you want to check what's called the PR interval. They will always ask you about this stupid question. And I did a telemetry unit first for, I think I did one for 1 year, another for another, so total 2 years before I did emergency room. And I was looking at rhythm strips every day, every day, every day. So after a while, you can kind of just look and you can see that the PR interval is not right. But that's not really how you should start it out, and technically you shouldn't even do it that way. But when you're measuring your PR interval, you're starting from the beginning of the P. So as soon as you see that P leave the line, that's where you're starting to measure. Now your regular PR interval is 0.12 to 0.20. So that's what, 3 to 5 of the small blocks, the little teeny weeny blocks. That's normal for every person. So now if you're looking at this complex that you see, it doesn't exactly walk out. It's only one. Everything else walks out exactly, but that one is just a little bit off in where its placement is supposed to be in the rhythm strip. If the PR interval is normal, and then you look at the QRS, and the QRS is narrow and it's normal, what's a QRS supposed to be? I'll get back to you on that, but that's another important one. But if your QRS is narrow, you pretty much always want it to be kind of a little thin and thin looking. As long as it's kind of thin looking, you know you're in the ballpark of something okay. So if you notice that there's the PR interval is where it should be, in between 0.12 and 0.20, and your QRS is narrow, then that's what you call a premature atrial contraction. The important part about that is that after the premature atrial contraction, you'll notice what they call a compensatory pause. All these big words for nothing, right? A compensatory pause just means that the heart has got rhythm going. Boo, 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 boo. If there's some loser that's like boo, 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 it's gonna be like boo, 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 boo. See, and I don't know if you noticed, but you see how when that stupid beat came, I stopped, and then I got back on beat, boo, 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 boo. That's exactly what your heart is gonna do. That is called the compensatory pause. That means that the atrial kind of dropped a stupid beat in the middle of the rhythm. It didn't belong there, and so it's going to give itself a second to get back on the rhythm. Now, if you walk it out from your R to R's, you'll see that every other R or P or whatever you're measuring, QRS complex, is going to measure out. So even though that one is off, if you pretend like where it should have been in its right place, and then you continue to walk it out, you'll see that all the other your QRS complexes are right where they should be. So that's just the one that's a little bit off center. That is going to be your PAC. Now, when your PAC has a little bit of a weirdness, did I write it down? Because this is something that I really wanted to know. Alright. If you're Aberrancy, it's really important, Aberrancy. Okay. So if everything is normal, but just the end, I guess, of the that QRS, if the end of the QRS is just a little weird, you're going to call that a PAC with aberrancy. That's another important thing that people want you to know. It's still a PAC. It just has a little bit of aberrancy. Just think of like a little weirdness at the end. It technically means aberrancy means that the conduction through the ventricles is abnormal. So the QRS could look wide. But it's not necessarily a wide, like lopsided, nasty QRS. It just means that it's a little bit wider than normal. It just looks a little bit off. It doesn't look like the rest of them. That's a PAC with aberrancy. So that's another thing that you would need to write down. Here's another one, just to piss you off. There's another one called a non-conducted PAC. That means the P wave came too early, and so it became blocked. So the one that I was telling you about, that weird beat, it's really hard to explain. But if you're looking at the strip, when that P drops early, the QRS comes with it. If it's just a PAC. If it's a PAC with aberrancy, it's going to be a P and then a QRS, and the last part of the S is going to be hanging to the side a little bit. Now, if it's a non-conducted PAC, that means you have your P and nothing. You're just going to get a little bit of a P. They said that looks like a weird T, or it can look totally just like a lump. And then you would call that an SA, a final atrial block. I know it's weird. So if you see a sinus going normal, doo-doot, 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 and then one of the T's looks off, then that's technically going to be a non-conducted PAC. That's what that is. Remember, the aberrancy is the QRS looks funny. A non-conducted PAC means the T looks funny. Now, another important thing to know about these is to remember, these are in your sinus, normal sinus rhythms. So these are all coming from the top booty-doo, little part of your heart. Next is going to be wandering atrial pacemakers.